Hello, and thank you for joining us on this fireside chat. My name is Andy Tilstra, and I have the pleasure to interview and introduce Dr. Karen Tilstra, the CEO and founder of Creativity Effect, an innovation education arm that helps you innovate in a simple, fun, and effective way. My name is Andy Tilstra, and I'm the CIO of Creativity Effect. We're very happy to be here, and I'm extremely happy to be interviewing Dr. Karen Tilstra about her new book labeled Demystifying Innovation, How to Face Your Deathline. Now, there's a lot of questions, a lot of material to get over, but first, hello, Karen. How are you today?
Hello, I'm great. I'm really excited to be here and have this opportunity to share what I've seen has helped a lot of people.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm really excited to learn more about this. And lastly, before we start getting into the material, even though this is a pre-recorded session, me and Karen will be in the chat to be able to interact and answer any questions that you have. So even though this is a pre-recorded, this will be as interactive and engaging as we can make it.
Right.
Well, let's get into it. So, Dr. Tilstra,
Yes.
you recently wrote this book labeled Demystifying Innovation, How to Face Your Deathline. First, why did you write this book?
Well, it kind of came about from just noticing after creating innovation labs and helping a lot of teams through innovation projects that it seemed like that people would be excited about innovation, be excited to be involved, and they'd get to a point and they would stop. And as I pushed a little farther, they were afraid. They were afraid that they were going too far, afraid they were going to make their bosses upset, afraid they were going to say something that didn't sit well with other people, afraid they wouldn't know what to do next. And I started noticing, I started drawing back from my experience growing up in a logging world. My father was a logger, and how loggers really address their fears. And I started noticing we really don't have a way in the corporate world or with a lot of businesses to really address our fears. We oftentimes just stop talking, or that's not going to work, or let's not do that, or we'll just stick to tradition. And so I started noticing that people would get to a point of the thing they were most afraid of, such as making a mistake, failing, being embarrassed in front of people. And when they got close to that, their behavior became worse. So I had this thought that it's sort of like a death line, that we all have death lines. Every single one of us has something that we are afraid of or we don't want to happen, and we'll do almost anything to not let that happen. And so the closer we get to that, the worse our behavior comes. And I noticed that in innovation teams, that when we got closer to, say, for example, one team, they would have to go speak to an executive. No, that's not going to work. We're going to go a different direction. And then I started saying, we need to really address our death lines. And it just kind of came to me as I had seen so many innovation projects falter or delay. And I just drew on the board this line that said, this is a death line. It's like what we're really afraid of. The closer we get to that line, the worse our behavior gets. And we will do anything to not cross that line. So it halts innovation. It thwarts creative thinking. It stops collaboration. So knowing about our personal death lines is very helpful. And knowing that we can manage them.
That's inspiring to hear, because I think the word deathline or the phrase deathline is very serious sounding. Sounds like something you don't want to ever interact with, but from what you're saying, it could be something very common, something in everyday
Right, and that's the whole point. It could be so simple, but yet it makes people act in ways that blocks moving forward or creative thinking. It could be a very simple thing. That's the mystery of it.
Well, Karen, that's very interesting. You've mentioned in a previous comment that you grew up on a logging farm with your family, and that's actually where you got this idea for a deathline, maybe in retrospect or maybe as a child. Can we go a little deeper into this logging reality where a deathline would be something that you draw out of it? So how did that
Well,
happen?
I think it wasn't really until my adult years, and looking back, it made sense. But loggers have very clear ways to handle big fears, like a tree falling on them. And so what I thought about, and it came about as an educational psychologist, and then getting into the study of innovation, I started to think back on that, and that loggers work very well in a high danger. Everything about it is dangerous, but they do it. They have
Dangerous in which way? I mean, obviously falling.
there
trees
was
and all
falling
that,
trees and having to communicate in very loud environments, big logging trucks rolling in and out, chainsaws.
It's a very
And
definitive.
chains can break and fly through the air. There's so many things that can go wrong. But growing up with
These aren't just small trees, right? These are.
this was out in California and Sierra Nevada's big trees. They weren't what I say the beloved wimpy trees of Florida, where my dad could get 3 logs on a truck was amazing. And I was behind a logging truck coming up from Miami, and that logging truck must have had 40 trees on it. So I'd say, okay. I took a picture, sent it to my dad. These are the trees in Florida. Anyway, but what I thought about is, in a very dangerous environment, they had figured out what lines not to cross and how to manage it by different signals, by different calls. I go more into my book, in the book about it. But so I thought we could do the same thing. We could identify the fears, like making a boss mad, for example, and then have ways to manage it instead of just taking the lowest common denominator every time. And I noticed this with a lot of frontline staff we worked with too, is to never get close to the death line. Don't want to make the boss mad. Don't want to make my employees mad. Don't want to do anything to cause a ripple. I mean, it's really not a way for a human to live, because when you think about the human brain, we have more neurons and synapses than all of the stars and planets and all of the whole solar system, the whole universe. And then we so oftentimes settle for very below average problem solving, and oftentimes creative thinking, what's that? And I know I'm probably over dramatizing it, but I think the key is to really be able to work at our highest level of potential, is to learn how to identify a death line and how to manage it. So at first I was just focused on, teaching about the death line. Then I started to notice there were 3 or 4 things that really mattered. And so I started thinking a lot about that. And I said, so we can identify our death line, but what are we going to do about it? But then I started putting some words to it. So then I came up with the words space, as in mental space, grace, extending understanding, and forgiveness in innovation and when challenges happen or problems happen, because innovation is never just an easy road. Pace, what pace is needed for good problem solving or innovation, and then place, what's a good place? We shouldn't always be in the same place. What place do we need? So again, it's space, grace, pace, and place. And then I noticed that they rhymed. I just kind of came up with that way, and then I said, so they all end in ACE. So I said ACE. And then as I looked at that, I said, what commonality exists between them? And I said, so these really are ways to always create engagement. So ACE, always create engagement. And so as I started to work with these 4 words, I noticed teaching them to innovation teams, it could be applied to any innovation model, any challenge they're facing. If it's design thinking, creative problem solving process, Six Sigma, whatever the creative problem solving model or way they're trying to come up with better solutions, you could apply these 4 ACEs. Space, grace, pace, and place. And it created a opening for people to think about, now, are we in the right headspace for this? Obviously a problem had arisen. Most innovation comes out of some kind of difficulty. Are we blaming? Are we focused on the anger, blaming these guys made a mistake, they should be fired? Is that consuming our energy? Can we learn more about the problem so we have grace? Because I do believe innovation, when it comes to innovation, forgiveness is core to innovation, because forgiveness allows us to move, and innovation is all about movement. And then pace. We oftentimes are hurry, 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 rush, rush, rush. What kind of pace is needed? Do we need to hurry, or is this one that we can take more time? And by just asking the question, what's the proper pace to really solve this problem, really makes a difference with teams. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe, over and over, just asking that question. I said, boy, this is one problem or one challenge that we're going to need to spend more time with. And then that gave them the courage to actually talk with bosses or directors. And almost always it was, yes, we want the right answer. Let's create more time. Then the place factor is I started noticing our general tendency in the work world, corporate America, and work settings was to solve problems right where we were or go to the conference room. But if we were to ask ourselves, what's the right place to solve this problem? That also really illuminated teams. It was like, well, maybe not in this conference room. Why don't we go take a walk? Or maybe let's go talk to some people. Or let's go to the innovation lab. Or whatever the case is, just asking the question. And then I started noticing when we started working with innovation teams, when we started asking people to think about their mental space, the grace they had coming into this project, what kind of pace, what kind of place, really made a difference. And then I noticed that when they asked those questions, the death line, their fears tended to subside because now they were actually able to address some of the things that were never brought to the front. Well, then as we went on, I noticed that when we would ask the questions, I hadn't really thought so much about the questions. I just said more of the words, the ACE words, the 4 ACEs. And then I thought, well, the ACEs really, as we started moving forward, weren't that helpful without the questions. And so now I say, identify your death line, manage it with the 4 ACEs and the questions, or I've been calling them probes because they really are probes. Questions, I love questions. We need questions. Questions really drive us forward. But when it comes to addressing a death line and really setting us up for good innovation, we want probes. We want to probe ourselves forward with the ACEs. So now we've been calling it the 4 ACE probes. We might change the name. We're still working with it, but I have found it to be helpful for people. And that's really what it's all about, is how can we help people be more creative thinkers and better problem solvers? We all need that, wherever we are.
That's fascinating. Now, this death line and these ACE probe questions and all these things are meant to create collaborative, introspective teams that are able to problem solve at any place, correct? At any situation.
Yeah.
Have you seen common barriers or blocks to stop a team from approaching these? Because these seem fairly intuitive.
Right, so that is the mystery. They are intuitive. So I'm not telling people anything they don't know. It's well, we get that.
Right.
But from my over a decade working in innovation and working with hundreds of innovation teams and helping lots and lots of different companies, it's us. Innovation is ultimately about humans. Every problem is solvable and it goes right back to a human. Problems are about humans, ultimately. And we are the ones that trip up innovation. We block innovation without even realizing it. And that's actually, I think, what was driving me forward is I saw people tripping up on their fears, which I started calling death lines, because not to be morbid, but I just saw it in my head, a line, and then as they cross, it's like, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna be embarrassed if I say that, or I don't wanna say something stupid in front of my boss. You cannot believe how many people worry about that. And I understand it, but I wanna say push past it. But we are the ones that halt innovation and creative process. It's us. We're the ones. It's almost like, who said that? Fear.
We have nothing to fear except fear itself.
No, we found what it is. We fear, and the fear is us. What does that say?
Does
anyone on the film crew know that? You know, it's
throw
like,
it in the chat, everybody.
we have found the enemy, and the enemy's us. I think that is so good when it comes to innovation,
right?
Because we are the enemy to innovation and the creative process. Because here's the cool thing: every one of us, no matter where you are, who you are, where you sit, what language you speak, you are creative, and you can become a good problem solver. We just lack skill.
Well, this conversation you're saying, it's reminding me of how, we've had a lot of conversations about people and how they can interact within stimuli, right? So it sounds, we've talked about people externalizing their fears or objections, right? I can't do that because I have a lot of work. I don't want to do this because my boss will get mad at me. That sounds like it's external factors. But what you're saying right now is that the blocks to innovation are internal. Everything is the internal, even what we say with Otto Scharmer and Theory U, the internal condition of the leader dictates the outcome of the innovation. And I think that can be encapsulated by your death line theory, because the death line is the ultimatum of the internal condition.
Right. Well, and also here's the thing that I've been amazed and kind of inspired by. I've yet to meet anybody that comes into the innovation lab, any of the innovation labs I've helped build, any of the teams I've helped develop their innovation skill. Nobody that I've met comes in and wants to thwart innovation, not be a creative thinker, to be a wet blanket on innovation. And oftentimes what they're proposing is they honestly, from their perspective, they feel it's helping. And that's, I think, the mystery, because innovation is really the melding of art and science together. And we get the science part. We have the processes, we know the rules, but the art part is like the mystery of it. It's like, we're a little afraid to go there, or what if we do something that doesn't make sense? And that's what I think the safeguard is. If we do have these 4 ACEs, space, grace, pace, and place, it gives us an opportunity to open up, to pause and reflect and think. And oftentimes it creates a way for us to be iterative, because with innovation, you never just go from A to Z. It's always a discovery, a co-discovery. We get co-inspired what to do, and then we create, then we prototype, and we iterate it. And I think that's what is the mystery to a lot of people, is we don't have time to do that. We're so busy. In fact, I remember one day so clearly, a head nurse in one of the innovation labs we were working with, she said, you know what? We no longer have any time to think. I thought, ooh, okay. That is a true statement, and it's a sobering statement. We all want to have time to think, but we get so busy and the pressure's on to reach goals and be successful. We just oftentimes don't have time to think. That's what these 4 ACEs help us do. Just pause, create a little more opening so we can think. And we never have to do it in one jump. Iterative. We try something. Did it work? Did it not work? Get the feedback. And it gives us opportunities to do that. And then it makes sense, and it works with us. And it's just not what we're just not comfortable with it, because we're process driven, and we're goal oriented, and we don't want to make mistakes, and we put ourselves into really insane asylums.
Powerful statement.
I mean, invisible insane asylums.
Right. Yeah. The internally constructed.
Yes.
Insane asylums.
I would say watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and you can start to see.
Yeah.
What...
Or Nurse Ratched on
Oh yeah.
Sponsored by these sponsors. So we've talked a lot about the death line and the philosophy, maybe the theory around it, and you've alluded to the 4 ACE questions, or the 4 ACE probes. I want to get a little bit more deeper into the practical application of those 4 ACE questions. So how have you seen teams or organizations able to foster those 4 ACE questions if, say, worst case scenario, everything is resistant to creating a culture of innovation? How do you see teams accepting, practicing, and expanding on those 4 ACE questions?
No, that's a good question. This is what I've learned from experience. Because I was saying it's iterative, when teams come together to the innovation lab and bring a challenge, or we put a team together, a cross-functional team, a diverse team to solve a problem, or it could even be explore an opportunity. But when you start launching people into an innovation process, they're eager and excited. They might be nervous and afraid, but there's still an eagerness and excitement to it. And when you share with them some things, some realities about the innovation process and about creative thinking, they become, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. And to say, and ask the questions. Let's just take a moment. In fact, with some of we're working with a group down in Lake Nona. Let's just ask ourselves, and we oftentimes give journals to teams that, as they're working through an innovation project. Think about these for a minute. What is your current mental space about this challenge?
And what do you mean by mental space?
Do you have the right mindset? Are you willing to open your mind? Are you willing to suspend judgment, reject the voice of judgment, fear, and cynicism?
Do you think someone can honestly look at their own mindset and be able to answer that about
Well,
innovation?
that is a very good question. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. But what I've learned by just asking the question raises awareness.
Well, Karen, so you just talked to us about space, about the mental space of going into innovation. Can we go, what is the grace in the 4 ACE questions? Can we get a little bit more the practical application of that? How could I foster that at my organization?
No, I love grace, because innovation is about moving forward and mistakes and learning iteratively as we go forward. And forgiveness, grace allows that to happen. If we don't have forgiveness when it comes to innovation, innovation can't happen. And so the grace factor is what really keeps us moving forward. It keeps us not taking ourselves too seriously. We take the work seriously, but ourselves not so seriously. And it keeps us moving forward with anticipation and energy, a positive energy. And I don't mean that to sound sappy, but innovation is about learning from mistakes, and you have to have grace when it comes to that.
Awesome. Very succinct, very clear. I think we live in a world where blame is almost
Right.
validating, and I think grace is a response to that.
Well, we need more grace in every sector, in every aspect of society.
And next would be pace. So how could you find the pacing for proper innovation?
Pace is, I think, probably the easiest one to ask. Just asking, what is the proper pace we need for this? Just asking that question just kind of gets people thinking, yeah, what is the right pace we need for this? Because if we don't ask it, we just fly through it. So sometimes flying through is good. Other times we just need to slow down and figure out what's going on.
And finally, but probably not least, the place.
Place. And again, place is pretty clear. When we're trying to solve a problem or explore an opportunity or come up with reimagine a way to do something, get into a place that works. Our tendency is to stay where we are. Like we're sitting here now. It takes some energy to move by this fire, which is heating up this chair. But it takes energy to stand up. And so, for example, this is a little example, I guess works. When we're brainstorming and people are sitting in chairs, they're much more hesitant to get up. But if you have them high stools and they're leaning more on stools, they get up with it's just a lean forward. And I think that's an example of place. What is the right place is the best for the problem you're trying to solve, or when you're trying to reimagine, or opportunity you're trying to explore. And if we don't ask that question, we tend to stay in the same place. And just changing your environment can really get the mind open. It's like, I like to say, going into an innovation space is like going on vacation, because your mind's like, oh wow, this looks different. What's going on here? That's what happens. The chemicals that get sparked in your mind, the serotonin, oxytocin, when you experience something new. And those are positive chemicals. And we have no problem activating negative chemicals, fear, isolation, sadness, death line, and we want to offset that. So the ACEs actually evoke positive chemicals in the mind. It's like, oh, possibility. What should my mental space be? Where is grace? What kind of pace? What kind of place? It's exciting.
Yeah, you may say instead of having an ace up the sleeve, I've got 4 of them.
Yeah,
that's just a stupid little
how to
joke.
ace your innovation.
I just aced this test all the while. Well, we're nearing the end of time, and as always, this can go on for probably
we could
hours,
talk
months.
forever. Yes,
But if I want to think on the perspective of a listener who maybe this is brand new. So if this is all completely new information to me and I have no idea what you're talking about, or not no idea, but it seems overwhelming, what is one thing that you want that employee, that middle manager, that CEO to hear, to take back to their community, their culture, their organization, that really enhances the ACEs and helps them innovate and collaborate? What's that one thing that you would say?
I would say if they could just take the 4 ACEs, space, grace, pace, and place, and just ask their group. It could be any group. It could just be even a department meeting, a conference meeting, a monthly conference meeting a group of executives have. Just ask the questions. Do I have the right headspace? Am I open-minded? Have I extended grace to the challenge and grace really means trying to understand what's going on. What's really going on here? That's what evokes grace. What pace do we need? Are we in the right place? And I always think place, physical place, but maybe it means are we in the right place in the problem too? Just asking those questions can shift people's thinking, and it opens up a way for us to dive deeper it lowers defenses, and it puts us into a forward motion, which is what we want. It's exciting.
Dr. Karen Tilstra, thank you so much for
it was fun.
talking with us today. Next is Roaring Fire for our
love the
fireside
fire.
chat. You may have noticed this died down a little bit because it was a bit much.
And thank goodness.
But thank you so much for joining us. If you're on chat or at Betos, me and Karen will be in the chat and we'll be able to interact with you. We hope that you can take something from this, bring it back to your innovation, your collaboration, your community, your organization, to reach those better and more sustainable, effective solutions. So we're from Creativity Effect. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. My name is Andy. This was Dr. Tilstra.
Karen Tilstra, and I hope this has been helpful in some way, because we really enjoy innovating and helping teams innovate. And so if we can help you innovate better, we are happy. So see you in the chat.
Thanks, guys. See you
Bye.
later.